my goshawk that I raised from just a little hatchling, and it was the first experience I've ever had imprinting a goshawk. She hatched May 25th of last year, which is 2023, and I got her on, I believe, June 4th. So she was almost exactly 10 days old when I got her, and it's amazing how rapidly they grow. But I really, really enjoy this experience. So you can kind of see in this video here, no little pin feathers at all, just downy. That downy is that, the really fluffy feathers that are around her. And I put that pop figuring there so that you can kind of get a little bit of understanding on kind of how small she was. She was very, very tiny and a pretty sensitive little animal. And when I first got her, she wouldn't eat on her own. So far, she's been just fed by her parents. And so I had to kind of manually feed her and put food directly into her mouth. Thankfully, I only had to do this for a couple days, and I used forceps to get, really long tongs basically to kind of get the food into her mouth. And I would try to make sure that she couldn't see my hands while I was doing that, because I didn't want any food and hand association with raising this bird. And it only took about 2 days, and within that time, she started eating on her own. It was pretty easy to get her to that point. And every single time I fed her food, I would either put food in her little kind of nest box while she was sleeping so she couldn't tell that I had put it there, or I would take her nest box and move it over and bring her to food. I never, ever, ever let her see that I was bringing food to her. Just after a few days, you could start to see these itty bitty little pin feathers starting to come through, and I noticed how dark they were. She is actually 3/4 of a northern goshawk and 1/4 Siberian, so she is a hybrid, but she's mostly a North American goshawk. This bird slept a lot. She would pretty much just get up, eat, and then immediately fall back asleep. Maybe 30 minutes later, she'd wake up, eat again, and then fall back asleep. And she wouldn't completely fill her crop every single time she ate. She would kind of fill it up a little bit at a time. And now during this time, I pretty much took her everywhere. Earlier, you saw that I had her like in a stroller and I was rolling her around. And this is her in my work truck. So she came with me to work every single day and just hung out with me. And yeah, she slept the majority of the time. And she was just this tired, sleepy little girl. And during that time, I would just touch her, constantly touching her and petting her and letting her see my hand and touch her so that she wouldn't be so afraid of my hands as she got older. About like 10 days after I got her, she already started walking around. It really didn't take that long. She would start off really, really wobbly, but as time goes on, of course, they get more and more confident. And she was walking around all over the house. Thankfully, I had tile and I didn't have to deal with getting all those mutes, all those mutes and slices and all their poop in carpeting. So it was all in the tile. Around this time, I started giving her food like on a rabbit carcass. I planned on hunting rabbits with her, and I chose rabbit because I knew I could provide her rabbit after rabbit after rabbit. I have a lot of rabbits in my area, and I knew I can provide her that quarry. So to start her association with rabbit being the preferred quarry, I pretty much would take all of her chopped up food and I'd put it on top of a rabbit carcass. So she kind of felt like she was eating out of that rabbit carcass and would more easily identify fur as food. And I do think that helped her a little bit. It's hard to say since this is, my first goshawk I ever flew. And I probably would have to try this a few more times to really notice a consistent trend. You can kind of also see a bunch of pine needles in there. Now, the reason I have pine needles is because crushed up or cut up pine needles can help reduce the risk of the bird getting aspergillosis. And aspergillosis is a fungal infection in their lungs. We're always breathing in, the asper spores and asper fungus, but our immune systems, as well as most birds, they can keep that fungus at bay. But goshawks have a harder time doing that. And the pine needles really help reduce the risk of the bird getting aspergillosis. I think because it is so dry out here where I'm at in Arizona that the risk of aspergillosis is a little bit lower. And the main reason a goshawk might get aspergillosis out here would be because they are highly stressed out. At this kind of stage, she would look outside a lot and just check out outside. She kept trying to like get through the window a lot too. And we didn't spend too much time outside once it hit roughly like 8 a.m. because it would just get so hot. In Arizona, where I'm at, it would get like up to about 110 degrees. And with all that downy feather on her, she had a hard time regulating her body temperature. And so we didn't go outside too much. And if we did, I always brought like ice for her to sit on to help keep her body temperature cool. And if she started panting, I was getting inside and trying to get her to enjoy that AC. So every night she would spend her night in the box. I would kind of push her into her box so that she really got used to being in there for long periods of time. I knew that in the future that she was going to have to spend like 5 or 6 hours in a box at a time, because sometimes I would have to bring her to work and then go hawking right after work, or go hawking on a break while in between my different jobs. And so I really needed her used to being in a bird box. And almost every time when I would open up the box, I would have food sitting out for her. I had this little rabbit lure just to kind of still help her associate fur with food. I probably didn't need to do that, but I just wanted to keep that reinforcement going. Getting a little bit bigger, and she's starting to rip and tear and pull at her food. I still would put a little bit of loose food in there. But once I noticed that she was starting to tear her food, I slowly made it more and more difficult for her to like pull the food out of the rabbit. Slowly I reduced the amount that I would chop up and would make her kind of pull and work for that food so that she can eat. So through this whole process, I let the hawk and the dogs socialize a lot. The dogs were always walking around her, almost always present whenever we were home. I would often bring my dog with me in the work truck too, just so that she can get used to the dogs being in the truck. I really wanted her to be very calm around these dogs and not see them as a threat or as somebody who would take their food. She kind of became more mobile as her feathers grew more. And she was starting to hop up on the stuff. She started hopping up onto the couch, onto the coffee table. Here she's on the dishwasher here while we were trying to just do the dishes. She was kind of getting in the way in a lot of situations. This was also the time where she was probably the most cuddly, where you can like scratch her head and neck and she would just like close her eyes. It's kind of that cute phase where they're not at all mean and they just kind of want to be with you and cuddle, and they're just really, really cute and fun at this stage. I also socialized the hawk with my daughter and the neighborhood kids that were on the street. We had kids over at our house all the time, and they were able to see the hawk, and she was able to see the kids running around and just kind of, get accustomed to a lot of commotion. When she started being able to have a well enough balance to be able to sit on my fist, now she wouldn't do this for very long. I had to be very careful and gentle because I didn't want to freak her out and give her a bad experience about standing on the glove. I couldn't walk around with her on the glove at this point. I could just barely have her on there, and if I stayed perfectly still, she could balance. And it wasn't until later that it was really easy for her to balance on the glove. At this stage, I noticed a little bit more aggression towards her food, and she also started flying around our house a lot. She would get up on the chandelier. She would kind of fly from one corner of the house, be on top of the kitchen cabinets, then fly around to the other. And I didn't really want to have to deal with, this bird flying around my house all day. So I began the hack at that point. I wanted her to figure out flying right at that point. And she was not hard pinned at this point. Her feathers were not grown all the way in. And so what I would do is I would put a little bit of food out in the morning. Normally I would put some food out at like 4 a.m. and then she would kind of eat a little bit of that, and then she would just go fly around my neighborhood. I let all of my neighbors know. They were all okay with this, And she mostly stayed in our little area because I have so many trees and so much shade that it stayed cool almost exclusively in this spot. So she would fly around until about 8 a.m. and she would get so hot that she would just like sit in a nice cool spot for a few hours before I would go and get her at roughly 10 a.m. So her hacking time was actually really, really short because it would get up to about 115 degrees. And even in the shade, if she's sitting there in the 115 degrees, she's just panting and panting and panting and panting. Her body just can't cool off fast enough. And so it had me worried that she was going to overexert herself on accident while she was figuring out how to learn how to fly. But fortunately, I started working at a local stadium as a contractor, and they let me fly Riza in that stadium. So after about 2 weeks of her being hacked for only like 5 or 6 hours in my backyard, I could go into the stadium, which was air conditioned, by the way, and she could stay out there for 10 hours or more. So it was this really cool, incredible opportunity, and I'm super grateful that they allowed me to do this. And she just hung out in there, and I felt like it was much safer than my backyard, much safer than being outside in the hot sun. You can kind of see how she's getting a little bit stressed. She's developing a lot of different fear responses at this point, and she's kind of starting to mature. This is right at that point where they develop a lot of natural fears towards stuff. And the Tame Hack is supposed to kind of help assist in reducing that fear. And so we had a great time flying in the stadium. And I'm really grateful I was able to do this. So we were able to hack this bird for 4 weeks before I really started walking her around. So thankfully, and it was all thanks to the job that we were able to do at this stadium. Now, near the end of the hack, she finished hard pinning, which is the point I thought she would start trying to fly and catch stuff. And when I started taking her outside, she would act extremely stressed out. I struggled figuring out what was wrong and what was going on. And a lot of it was she just didn't know what was going on. And just because she didn't know what she was supposed to do, it was kind of stressing her out. I was trying to keep her on the glove, and she didn't understand her job. And then she also wasn't chasing rabbits right away. I had a few recommendations given to me to do some exercises for 2 or 3 weeks at home. And we started doing these kind of more trust building exercises like jump ups or restrained pursuits. And she started improving. After about 1 week, she calmed down. And it was kind of like that first time when she started developing her fear. I noticed her fear started to leave. And she was really, really calm, and she quieted down a lot more. Right here in the car, she used to freak out about being in the car. And in this video, she's just slightly nervous about it. And that's when I noticed kind of the biggest change, is that she had this kind of flip. And then all of a sudden, a switch turned on, and one day she started chasing rabbits. And she started chasing them really, really hard. And about 2 days after she started chasing rabbits, she finally caught her first rabbit. And it just kind of snowballed from there. A couple days later, she caught another one. And then she caught another one the next day. And the season just went off, and she was catching rabbits almost every single time. I think we only went home empty-handed 4 times out of the whole season. And it was odd for her to not catch at least 2. She would catch at least 2 every single time we were out. Again, I loved this bird. We had a fantastic season. I hope this gives you guys a little bit of insight on how I raised her. If you do have any additional questions, leave them in the comments below. Maybe I'll do a more detailed version of the steps on how I did it. I just kind of want to make sure that you guys understand this isn't a how-to video. It's just me sharing my experience. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. You have a wonderful day, and we will see you next time.